50,300 tons at full load. That is the German battleship Bismarck, with her bunkers filled and her magazines filled, ready for sea, the heaviest warship any European power had ever put in the water. 90 miles an hour, that is the attack speed of a fairy swordfish. Open cockpit, fixed undercarriage, fabric stretched over a metal frame, an aircraft the Fleet Air Arm already considered obsolete when the war started. 12 degrees. On the evening of the 26th of May, 1941, 400 nautical miles west of Brest, 15 of those biplanes came off the deck of the carrier Ark Royal into a force 9 gale and went looking for her. They flew for an hour and a half through driving rain and low cloud, attacked at 20 feet in failing light, and every one of them came back. Their strike leader reported to Ark Royal, estimate no hits. He was wrong. 1 torpedo had gone into the stern, and Bismarck's 2 rudders had jammed at 12 degrees to port. They could not be straightened. She could not be steered around it. The most powerful ship Germany ever built spent that night turning slowly into the weather and into the guns of a fleet that had been ordered, in almost exactly those words, to destroy her. And it was a fleet: 6 battleships and battlecruisers, 2 aircraft carriers, 13 cruisers, 21 destroyers. Ships pulled off convoy escort in mid-Atlantic, pulled out of Halifax, pulled up from Gibraltar, one of them carrying a refit booking in Boston that she never kept. All of it for a single ship on her first operation, 8 days out of harbor. On the morning of the 27th of May, they caught her. For 90 minutes, they fired 2,876 shells into her at ranges that came down to 2.5 kilometers. She still had to be finished with torpedoes. That is where the story most people know stops, and it is where the argument starts. Subscribe if you want the part that argument turns on, because it is not a matter of opinion and it is not in the newsreels. In June 1989, a man who had found Titanic 4 years earlier put cameras on Bismarck 3 miles down on the flank of an extinct undersea volcano. What those cameras did not find on her armor belt is the reason naval historians are still fighting about this ship, and it is not an argument about who fired the last shot. To understand what was on the seabed, you have to start 22 years before Bismarck was laid down, with a different German fleet, and with what it did to itself. On June the 21st, 1919, interned in the anchorage at Scapa Flow, the German High Seas Fleet opened its own sea valves and went to the bottom. 74 ships. It was the last order the Imperial Navy ever gave itself, and it was an order to disappear. What followed was written down. Article 181 of the Treaty of Versailles allowed Germany 6 battleships in commission. Article 190 capped any capital ship at 10,000 tons. Germany was not merely defeated at sea, it was told in a document the maximum size of the thing it was permitted to want. The man who spent the next 20 years working around that document was born in Wandsbek, outside Hamburg, on April the 24th, 1876. Erich Raeder was the son of a headmaster who taught French and English. A man his son described in terms of hard work, thrift, religion, and obedience. Raeder entered the Imperial Navy in 1894 at 18. He was bookish, precise, and he rose through staff work rather than through commands. By 1912, he was senior staff officer to Vice Admiral Franz von Hipper, commanding the scouting forces, and by 1917, he was Hipper's chief of staff. He was in the navigation room of the battlecruiser Lutzow at Jutland while she was being taken apart around him, and he finished that battle on another ship because his own was dying. Then came the assignment that shaped everything. After the war, Raeder was given the job of writing the official history of German cruiser warfare in foreign waters. 2 volumes: the Commerce Raiders, the Lone Ships, the Long Voyages, the Successes, and the Endings. The man who would one day send Bismarck into the Atlantic to hunt convoys spent years of his life documenting, in detail, exactly how the last attempt at that had gone. There was another officer with another reading of the same war, and he lost. Wolfgang Wegener was born in Stettin on September the 16th, 1875. In 1915, as a fleet staff officer, he wrote 3 memoranda arguing that Germany's naval problem was not the size of its battle fleet at all. It was geography. The German coast opened onto a dead angle. The exits from the North Sea could be closed by a power that already sat across them, and no amount of tonnage in the Heligoland Bight was going to alter where the Atlantic trade routes ran. Naval strategy, Wegener wrote, is the science of geographic position with regard to trade routes. Ships cannot change a map. He was ordered to stop writing by 1916. He retired in 1926 with the rank of Vice Admiral, amid friction with Raeder, who thought the whole thesis was flawed and said so in a paper of his own. Wegener published anyway. Die Seestrategie des Weltkrieges, the naval strategy of the World War, came out in Berlin in 1929, and the argument between those two men never really ended. Raeder disavowed the thesis and then built a navy that needed it to be wrong. Meanwhile, the workarounds accumulated. The Deutschland-class Panzerschiffe, the so-called pocket battleships, laid down from 1929, 6 28-centimeter guns, diesel range, faster than anything that outgunned them, and technically inside the treaty if you did not look too hard. Then Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. Each ship was an answer to a legal ceiling rather than to an enemy. And then the ceiling was lifted on the 18th of June 1935. In London, Sir Samuel Hoare and the German ambassador Joachim von Ribbentrop signed the Anglo-German Naval Agreement. Germany was granted a surface fleet of up to 35% of Britain's. In battleship tonnage, that came to 184,000 tons, which is 5 ships of 35,000 tons each. 5 months later, a contract went out to a shipyard in Hamburg. The contract was placed on the 16th of November 1935 with Blom and Voss, construction number 509. The contract name was Ersatz Hanover, replacement for Hanover because on paper this was not a new battleship at all, but a substitute for an obsolete pre-dreadnought. The keel went down on the 1st of July 1936 on slipway 9. Officially, she displaced 35,560 tons standard, which put her neatly inside the Washington limit. Actually, she displaced 41,700 tons standard and 50,300 at full load. That is roughly 6,000 tons of ship that did not exist in the paperwork. It is worth being precise about the cheating, because the popular version overstates it. The Second London Naval Treaty of 1936 did contain an escalator clause, but it applied to gun caliber, not to displacement. The rise from 35,000 tons to 45,000 came later, through diplomatic maneuvering after everyone had already started building. And nobody kept to the original figure. Vittorio Veneto went over, Richelieu went over, King George V went over, North Carolina went over. Germany was not uniquely dishonest here. Germany was simply the least constrained by anyone's opinion. Now read the requirement itself, because it is stranger than the tonnage. The Bismarck class was designed for the traditional job of fighting enemy battleships in home waters. That is what the armor scheme is for. That is what the gunnery is optimized for. That is the tactical picture the design assumes. But the Naval High Command intended to use these ships as long-range commerce raiders in the Atlantic, hunting convoys thousands of miles from any German dockyard. Those are not the same ship. A vessel built to slug it out at moderate range under friendly skies, and a vessel built to survive alone in the middle of an ocean with no yard, no air cover, and no friends, have different priorities in almost every compartment. That contradiction was not a compromise reached during construction. It was written into the drawings before the keel was laid, and every trade in this ship descends from it. There was no design competition in the ordinary sense, no rival submission beaten on points. What there was instead was an escalation. France laid down Dunkirk with 33-centimeter guns. So Germany answered with the 28-centimeter guns of Scharnhorst. France laid down Richelieu in 1935 with 380-millimeter guns, and Germany answered with the new 38-centimeter gun. Guns of 40.6 centimeters were permitted under the 1936 treaty, and the design staff considered the 38-centimeter adequate, and there is a duller fact underneath that judgment. Germany did not have any 40.6 centimeter guns at the time. She was launched on 14 February 1939, christened by Dorothy von Lowenfeld, a granddaughter of Otto von Bismarck. Hitler gave the speech. Fitting out took another 18 months, during which her original straight stem was cut off and replaced with a raked Atlantic bow. Then, in the autumn of 1940, she went into the Baltic for trials. And during those trials, they found something about the way she steered that could not be fixed. Take the ship apart one decision at a time, and every single one of them is defensible. The main battery went into 4 twin turrets rather than 3 triples. The design staff decided that 4 twins gave the best distribution. Equal firepower forward and aft, no blind arcs to manage, and a simpler fire control problem than a triple mounting where 3 barrels share a cradle and throw each other's shells around. It was a known, reliable, well-understood mounting. The cost is length and weight. 4 turrets need more barbette, more armor ring, more hull. She carried 8 guns, where contemporaries carried 9 or 10 on similar tonnage. And she paid for the difference in steel. The armor was incremental rather than all or nothing. The British and American schools of the period concentrated everything into a heavily armored box around the machinery and magazines and left the ends essentially unprotected. Bismarck spread it: 320 millimeters of lower belt, 145 millimeters of upper belt with no portholes cut into it, an armored deck of 80 to 120 millimeters. 70% of her waterline length sat inside the citadel, 22 watertight compartments. Over 90% of the hull electrically welded rather than riveted. A torpedo bulkhead of 45 millimeters set back 5.5 meters from the outer plating instead of the 4.5-inch Scharnhorst. A beam of 36 meters, wide for the length, giving her a metacentric height of around 4 meters, the highest of any battleship of her decade. That set of choices bought exactly what it was meant to buy, which was the ability to keep floating. It also meant that the weight had to come from somewhere, and it came from the ends. Her steering gear was armored in principle. Below the waterline it was in effect not. The secondary battery went in split. 12 15-centimeter guns for surface work, low angle, unable to elevate against aircraft. 16 10.5-centimeter guns for anti-aircraft work. No dual-purpose weapon anywhere in the ship. In 1936, that was ordinary practice and defensible practice, because a gun that does one job well beats a gun that does 2 jobs adequately. It was still ordinary practice on the evening of 26th of May, 1941, when 15 aeroplanes came at her at 20 feet through a gale, and the ship had exactly 1 layer of the wrong kind of gun to meet them. And then the trade that decides everything: 3 propeller shafts and 2 rudders. Here is what that means, and it is worth stopping and putting it plainly, because the whole ship comes down to this. A ship does not turn because the engines push it round. A ship turns because of a flat plate at the stern held at an angle in moving water. Water pushes on that plate. The plate is a long way behind the point the ship pivots around. So a small sideways push at the back swings the whole hull. That is the rudder, and that is all it is. Now take the rudder away. A ship with 2 propellers well apart can still turn, roughly, by driving one harder than the other, one ahead and one astern if it needs to. It is clumsy and slow, and it works. But that trick only works if the rudder is sitting in the middle, doing nothing. A jammed rudder is not a rudder that has stopped working. A jammed rudder is a rudder that keeps working permanently at full effort in one direction. And it never gets tired, and every knot of speed you make gives it more force to turn you with. To beat it, you need more sideways push from your propellers than that plate is generating all the time for as long as you want to go anywhere. Bismarck had 3 shafts. The center one runs down the middle and gives you no leverage at all. That leaves 2 close together on a hull 36 meters wide. She also had her 2 rudders mounted close together in a narrow tapered stern, which sounds like redundancy and is not. 2 rudders side by side in the same small volume of water are not a backup. They are one target. The Baltic trials established the consequence. She could not be reliably steered on her screws alone. Robert Ballard's reading, which is the one that has stuck, is that a 4-shaft arrangement would have given her that option, and that the center shaft weakened the keel where it left the hull as well. The problem was identified before she ever went to war. It could not be corrected. 12 degrees, not hard over. 12 degrees on a plate she could not overcome and could not reach in a force 9 gale with the whole weight of the ocean helping it. Which brings us to the thing almost everyone believes about this ship, and it deserves a fair hearing before it gets taken apart, because most of it is true. Bismarck is routinely called the most advanced battleship in the world. In 1941, she had superb optics and a genuinely excellent fire control system. She made just over 30 knots on trials. Her subdivision was extensive, her welding was modern, her stability was outstanding, her damage control was first-rate. She absorbed something like 400 hits and stayed on the surface. Every one of those statements holds up. The duller version is that she was a very well-made expression of an older idea. The historians disagree openly about how much older. The International Naval Research Organization's analysis notes that her machinery layout, with its longitudinal and transverse subdivision of the engine and fire room complexes, closely resembles Baden and Bayern of the previous war, and says plainly that this is why many people call the class copies of those ships. The K. Bismarck design study rejects that outright, saying the only things they share are 8 38-centimeter guns in 4 twin turrets and a 3-shaft plant. The truth sits somewhere in the smudge, and the smudge is the interesting part. This was a 1930s battleship designed by an institution that had been legally forbidden to design battleships for 15 years. There was no continuous line of practice, no incremental improvement, no generation of mistakes to learn from. There was a treaty, a gap, and then a rush. She was commissioned at 12:30 on the 24th of August 1940 at the Blohm and Voss yard under Kapitän zur See Ernst Lindemann. Which leaves one question. What happens when a ship designed to fight in the North Sea is sent into the Atlantic alone? On the 19th of May 1941, she left Gotenhafen with the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen, Operation Rheinübung. 8 days from there to the end of everything. The man in command of the operation was Admiral Gunther Lütjens, born in Wiesbaden on the 25th of May 1889, the son of a merchant. He joined as a cadet in 1907 and graduated from the Naval Academy 20th in a class of 160, which earned him a battleship posting. He disliked it. He transferred to torpedo boats as soon as he could and spent the First World War in small ships, and he commanded torpedo boat flotillas between the wars. The man given Germany's largest battleship had built his career on the smallest things that floated. His success was recent and real. From the 22nd of January to the 22nd of March 1941, he had taken Scharnhorst and Gneisenau into the North Atlantic in Operation Berlin, sunk or captured 22 ships totaling around 115,000 tons, and brought them into Brest after a voyage of some 18,000 miles, a record for a German battle group. It was that result that persuaded Raeder to approve Bismarck's sortie. Lütjens himself wanted to wait until autumn. When Tirpitz and the repaired battle cruisers could come too, he lost that argument. On the morning of the 24th of May in the Denmark Strait, they met the battle cruiser Hood and the battleship Prince of Wales. Bismarck fired 40 38-centimeter shells. Hood blew up and sank in about 3 minutes. Of 1,418 men aboard, 3 came home. Ted Briggs, Robert Tilburn, and William Dundas picked out of the water 3.5 hours later by the destroyer Electra. Prince of Wales was less than 2 months in commission with civilian technicians still aboard fixing her turrets. She managed 18 salvos, hit Bismarck 3 times, and broke off. Lindemann wanted to chase her down and finish her. Lütjens, holding to orders that told him not to engage warships unless he had to, refused. It is a decision that gets argued about endlessly, and it was consistent with everything he had been told. One of those 3 hits mattered. It flooded compartments forward and opened a fuel tank. That is the hit that turned a commerce raid into a run for the French coast. And then the accumulation begins. Rodney is taken off escorting a liner with her refit slot in Boston waiting. Revenge sails from Halifax. Ramillies leaves her convoy in the Western Atlantic. Force H comes up from Gibraltar. Coastal Command flies grid squares across empty ocean. On the morning of 26 May, a Catalina flying boat finds her, co-piloted by an American, Leonard Smith, from a country that was still officially neutral. Along the way, there is a detail only a navigator would carry. Lütjens broke radio silence for half an hour, and British direction-finding stations took bearings on him. Those bearings were sent to Tovey's flagship and plotted on a Mercator chart. High-frequency radio travels along great circles, and to plot those bearings correctly, you need a mnemonic chart, not a Mercator one. The lines were laid down straight when they should have curved. For 7 hours, the home fleet steamed away from the ship it was hunting because of the projection printed on a piece of paper. What put them back on her was a father. On 25 May, a Luftwaffe general, Hans Jeschonek, sent a signal asking after his son, who was serving aboard Bismarck. He sent it on a Luftwaffe Enigma key that Bletchley Park had broken. The reply said the ship was making for Brest. It was decrypted by Jane Fawcett, who was 20 years old. And then, on the afternoon of the 26th of May, the Royal Navy pointed itself at itself. Ark Royal launched a strike, and nobody had told the air crews that the cruiser Sheffield had been sent ahead to shadow. They found a large warship where no British ship was supposed to be, and 11 torpedoes went into the water at their own side. The torpedoes were fitted with new duplex magnetic pistols designed to detonate under a hull, and most of them exploded on hitting the sea. Sheffield's captain ordered his anti-aircraft gunners to hold fire and comb the tracks. Nobody was hurt. As the last section pulled away, an air gunner signaled by lamp, "Sorry for the kipper." They flew back, and Ark Royal's crew rearmed them with contact pistols, which is the only reason that 3 hours later, the torpedo that mattered went off when it touched her. 15 aircraft went out on the second strike at 7:15 in the evening. All 15 came back. One of them had been hit 150 times. And at dawn, the ship that came over the horizon to finish the job carried 10 guns, 4 of which were the wrong size on purpose. King George V mounted 10 14-inch guns in 2 quadruple turrets and 1 twin. Britain chose 14 inches because Britain had pushed for that limit in the first place, largely on cost grounds, and then honored it after Japan walked out of the conference and everyone else quietly stopped bothering. The Admiralty had originally wanted 9 15-inch guns and dropped the idea to stay inside a treaty it had helped write. Give the British answer its due, because it deserves it. The 14-inch Mark VII was a good gun, built without wire winding, with longer barrel life and better accuracy than earlier British practice. King George V had modern radar-assisted gunnery and found her target early on the morning of May the 27th. Rodney, a 14-year-old ship, threw a broadside of 9 16-inch shells, heavier than anything Bismarck could put in the air, and the quadruple mountings jammed. They jammed on Prince of Wales in the Denmark Strait, when she could only get 5 guns or fewer into most of her salvos. They jammed again on King George V during the final battle, with the forward turret out for half an hour. The causes were mundane: rushed commissioning, undertrained crews, shells fouling in the revolving rings, fatigue. Nothing about that is a triumph of British design. The real difference between the two navies is not in the guns at all. It is institutional. Germany built the best single ship it could afford and then had to send it out alone because there was no fleet to send with it. Britain built a system, and most of the system was unglamorous. Cruisers with radar, shore direction finding stations, flying boats built in America, a country house full of mathematicians, an aircraft carrier, canvas biplanes that were obsolete in 1939 and still flying in 1945. Not one item on that list photographs well. A battleship is the thing you can put on a stamp and point at in a newsreel and defend in a budget meeting. A fleet is the thing that finds you on a Monday morning 400 miles from a port you will never reach, which is Wolfgang Wegener's argument arriving 11 years late and unacknowledged. Ships cannot change a map. Nobody in Berlin had to concede the point because the ship was about to sink and take the argument down with her. The people who paid for the difference were about 2,000 men, most of them in their early 20s, in a hull they could no longer steer. So the Royal Navy cornered her. Now watch what its guns actually did. The first shells fell at 47 minutes past 8. At 2 minutes past 9, she was hit on the forecastle and the foretop rangefinder was destroyed. At 8 minutes past 9, the forward turrets, Anton and Bruno, went out of action. At 13 minutes past 9, the after control position, from which the 4th gunnery officer had just fired 4 salvos at King George V, was destroyed by a 14-inch shell. Inside half an hour, Bismarck had effectively stopped being a warship. The firing went on for another hour. 2,876 shells between 47 minutes past 8 and 19 minutes past 10. Somewhere between 300 and 400 hits. At around 9:30, with the bridge no longer answering anything, the executive officer, Commander Hans Uels, took command from the damage control center and gave the order to abandon and scuttle. Shortly before 10, in the middle engine room, Lieutenant Commander Gerhard Junak took a telephone call, passing that order down from the chief engineer. Prepare her for sinking. It was the last order he received aboard. He had charges placed at the sea intake valves and sent men to open the hatches at the shaft tunnels. He left the engine room at about 10 past 10, with the lights still burning and a shaft still slowly turning. She went down at about 20 to 11. Then, on the 8th of June, 1989, Robert Ballard found her at roughly 4,700 meters, upright on the flank of an extinct volcano, buried in silt to about her normal waterline, and the hull had not imploded. That matters more than it sounds. A ship that sinks with air still trapped inside it gets crushed on the way down. Bismarck did not. She was already full of water when she left the surface. Ballard's team counted 8 holes in the hull, 1 on the starboard side, 7 on the port side, every one of them above the waterline. No underwater penetration of the armored citadel at all. The counter case is real, and it comes from serious people. David Mearns went down in July 2001 and found gashes low on the hull where it met the seabed. His reading was that the slide down the volcano lengthened them, but torpedoes started them. Eric Grove, who was on that expedition, said he did not believe a word of the scuttling theory and that the ship was very heavily holed below the waterline. Most experts on both sides of it accept that she was going to sink regardless. But James Cameron's survey in 2002, with smaller submersibles that could get at parts of the hull sides nobody had reached, produced the number that will not go away. Working from that footage, Gaskell, Doolin and Durans count exactly 2 places where an armor-piercing shell went all the way through the 320mm main belt, both on the starboard side amidships, both probably Rodney's 16-inch guns, firing from very close range in the last 20 minutes. Sit with that. 2 out of nearly 3,000. The surprise is not that she was doomed. She was. The surprise is narrower and harder than that. The entire Royal Navy was ordered to destroy this ship. It did everything that could reasonably be asked of it, at ranges where nobody could miss, and the physical evidence 3 miles down says the pressure hull was still substantially closed when the men inside opened it themselves. 12 degrees decided where she would die and who would be standing over her. It did not decide how. That was settled in an engine room by men with demolition charges and a telephone line that had already gone dead once. She was not sunk by the largest guns in the Atlantic. She was delivered to them by a rudder angle and then let go of from the inside. So the mismatch in this story was never 50,000 tons against a canvas biplane. That comparison only looks absurd if you believe the ship was the weapon. Add it up. 4 twin turrets over 3 triples, armor everywhere over armor where it counted, a belt over a steering gear, 3 shafts over 4, 1 perfect ship over a fleet of imperfect ones, a battleship over the aircraft that killed it. Every one of those choices was made by serious people for reasons they could write down, and every one of them was an answer to a question about ships rather than a question about oceans. Now come down from all of it to a rope. The 4th gunnery officer, Burkhard von Müllenheim-Rechberg, had fired 4 salvos at King George V before a shell took the roof off his position. Hours later, he was in the water alongside the cruiser Dorsetshire with several hundred other men. He got a hand to a rope, took the other hand off to climb, misjudged how much strength he had left and fell back into the sea. He found the same rope again. He did not let go a second time. He asked the men above him to haul him up, and they did. 86 men were pulled aboard Dorsetshire that morning, 25 aboard the destroyer Maori. A submarine picked up 3 the next day, and a weather ship found 2 more, which is why no 2 books agree on the total. One of the men taken aboard Dorsetshire died of his wounds the following day. Around 2,000 did not come out of the water. 12 degrees.